Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on business process and inherited waste. Our presenter is Joseph McAuliffe and I'll hand over to him in just a moment. But before that, I just want to run you through some housekeeping notes on how we will proceed with the afternoon. The slides and the recording of the webinar will be available through a link that we send post-webinar. Please allow up to a week for us to be able to put these onto the slide share page and also on our YouTube channel. At the end of the webinar, there'll be a post-webinar survey that pops up, and I would ask please that you dedicate a minute to do that survey for us because we value your feedback. As you're listening to Joseph talking, and if you have any questions, you can type them into the questions box, which you will see at the bottom of the control panel. And Joseph will allocate some time at the end to answer your questions, and I hope you do have some for him. And all that remains now for me is to hand over to Joseph, and thank you for attending this webinar, and I hope you have a good afternoon.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Joe. I come from a small, tiny island called Malta. My job basically is trying to get into different organizations, and we try to identify opportunities for improvement and effectively implement them, take them through it, review processes, and do change management and effectively come up with some kind of solutions. One of the main problems that we normally find is that many organizations get lost into their operation and fail to see where this organization is going, where their processes are going, where their operations are going. So in order to enable us to put it into a very simple scenario, I normally try to review a process in a very simplistic manner. So if you can bear with me, the basic definition for a process, okay, is very basically converting inputs into outputs, adding value. In doing that, we need some kind of controls that tell us what are the parameters within which we need to work. In order to convert the inputs into outputs within those controls, we naturally need some resources, and of course, we are very interested in how well we perform, and therefore we need to measure our process at different points, at the back end, in the middle, at the beginning. As you all know, unless we measure, we don't know whether we are actually improving, staying the same, or doing anything wrong. That could very highly define any kind of business operations, be it manufacturing, be it services, whatever. Okay. Now, there is a little bit more to that one. So if we can perhaps start thinking what happens as our organization starts growing, our original process, our original solution will start growing. And of course, we can expect that as an organization goes through different changes by time, we need to review processes. Many times, what do we do? Many times we have our processes, they are fully defined and they are tailored to suit the current needs. Many times we implement a software solution, an ERP system, in order to automate most of the repetitive standardized processes. As we go along, because the process is not operating in a vacuum, we all know that different parameters change around us in the environment. As we do that, we start making our process grow to cater for those changes. It could be new legislation that comes in. What happens? We need to start building up patch solutions in order to help us add up to our original process. The growth will have a natural expansion of our process. And before long, we get something like what we're seeing at the current slide. Our core process and onto it I call them certain growth, which I call them mushrooms. It could be we can have an ERP system that was designed and set up in place a few years back. The ERP system is what it is. It automates a defined process. But if we need to add in some additional capability, some additional rules in the business, possibly we need to find a patch solution to it, be it an extra module, be it exporting data into an Excel spreadsheet and doing the reporting in our Excel spreadsheet. I call them basically mushrooms. Nothing wrong with gradual growth. We have to respond to the natural environment around us, and as organizations like operate within a sea of aspects that are influencing it, we need to cater for that growth. What we have to be careful is that sometimes that growth gives rise to a massive number of little mushrooms that are growing on top of each other. Eventually, we might find that that growth is actually becoming rather unstable. As you know, mushrooms are very tasty stuff. I love mushrooms on pizza, Italian style. What else can you ask for that? But we also know that some of the fungi are actually harmful. And we might find that as we grow, as our mushrooms start growing on our process, we start building in inherent waste, inherent instabilities into our process. There comes a time when we understand that this process can no longer be sustainable. And if we keep on operating with such a mushroomed growth pattern, we risk failure at some point in time. What we have to do is eventually have a review of what are our core, real activities that need to stay. We need to have an independent view, okay, an external view of our current operation. Normally what happens is that some people are working within their function. They are working within their function, they make it better, they make it efficient, they make it effective, but they work in what we call silos. And we fail to see how our operation can affect the others. By having a review of these operations, we need to identify what is really core and what is not core. And we need to identify what is value adding to our operation and what is not value adding to our operation. How many times have I walked into organizations where they claim to me that they are extremely busy and hardworking and they need to add on more resources? More resources because their current staff complement is very busy. My problem with that is a simple question that some people hesitate to answer. I say, fine, it's very good to be busy, but busy doing what? Are we busy adding value or are we busy managing waste? Let's take a very simple example. Manufacturer buys material to build his product. That material is put into warehouse at Goods and Merds, and we start the assembly. Something goes wrong in the assembly. We generate rejects. Because we have rejects, we have what I call conversion loss. What do? We need to put in a system, hence one of those mushrooms you see on the screen, in order to manage that reject, to manage that scrap. So what do? We put in a defects management procedure. We identify an area within our warehouse where we can allocate the material that is on hold. We need to stock take and manage the material that is on hold. We need to eventually process some paperwork, raise a claim with our production department, why they got it wrong. Eventually, we have to take a decision. Do we scrap the rejects? Do we rework them? Scrapping them is sheer waste, which everybody can identify. Reworking is another kind of waste. You are not adding value by fixing a broken product or sub-assembly. So as you notice, as volume grows, if our process is not fine-tuned, the rejects in our process, be it manufacturing, be it services, it could be a data entry operation. I might be entering data into my database as part of a service level that I am offering to a client. If my data is not correct, if my data is not clean data, what's the point of running a report if the report is going to extract data that is not accurate? My report, I can conclude, is not actually a factual report. Many a times we run a report and we need to check it manually to make sure that we've captured everything. Again, we are reworking what should be value-adding activity. Running a report, you're adding value in order to enable you to take a decision. Building things in a manufacturing environment, you are adding value by putting things together to generate another product. Any fallouts from those processes, we need to manage. We need to create a warehouse, a quarantine area. We need to create a management system to manage our quarantine area. Our reporting, if our reporting is not fact-based, if we suspect that our data is not correct, we need to validate it, we need to check it, we need to review it, we need to pop it around the boss to have a look at it. Why should I have a look at it, I would ask. A controversial question that sometimes I put onto some of my clients is like if you had to hire a secretary, you would hire a secretary to type out your letters. You are off to a very important meeting with the chairman and you need to write out a one-pager document, and of course you call in your secretary and you tell him or you tell her, can you please type out what I am going to tell you? I need it very quick because I'm going into a meeting and I need to take this statement in with me. So you narrate out or you pass on the basic information for your secretary to create a document. A document that is going to be presented back to you for you to sign, to pass it on to the chairman, to the board of directors, whoever it is. And I tell them, what would you do first thing? The moment that your secretary has typed out your letter, has produced your letter, has given you the service, and you are going to hand carry that letter straight to the chairman. Now, to put you in the picture, I would have hired a secretary. What does a secretary do? A secretary, in very simple terms, would normally type out reports, type out letters, generate documents for me. When I interview the secretary, I would probably ask him or ask her how fast they can type, how accurately they can type, the languages, how conversant they are with my business, and eventually negotiate a package which would be their salary, and therefore I hire them. I hire a secretary to type out letters. I hire a secretary to type out reports, to work out on administration, back office, supporting me. If I give an instruction to my secretary to generate this report for me, which I need to sign and take on to my chairman or to my boss, I ask my people, what do I expect to do? And people say, of course, I will check it, I will review it, and then I will sign it if it is correct. And I would say, but why do you need to review it? Because I am going to sign it. And they'd say, yes, but there's my name on it, so I want to make sure that my secretary typed out what I wanted to be typed out. And I would normally say, yes, but if you hired the secretary you hired is to type out letters. So what, don't you trust your secretary? Oh, yes, of course I trust my secretary. But I need to make sure that my secretary is doing exactly as I told. So there is this element of, call it trust, whatever, or maybe it's in our DNA that we have to check things. Theoretically, if my secretary is going to type a letter, I can just sign it and present it to my chairman because I believe that the secretary should deliver a quality product, a quality output, as we discussed in the employment interview. But of course, for various reasons, and especially because there is my name, I would check it out. I would read it. And not many people fail to understand that checking that document is actually not value adding. Now, of course, you need some level of controls, and it's also drawn in on the basic process model that we were seeing earlier on and even now on the screen. So there has to be some level of control. I agree to that. But how much control? Are we over controlling? Do we have mushrooms that are on our process which should not be there? So this leads me on to saying, listen, okay, so I have some levels of controls. I have my process that has grown gradually to cater for the growth in my business, but do I really need all that heavy infrastructure, all that heavy resource complement, all those heavy procedures, all that heavy administration? So what we normally solicit is that people stop and periodically review their process. I'm afraid to say I go into different organizations and I start asking and exploring what they have so that I start understanding the type of scenarios that I am about to start reviewing. And people show you processes that had been defined since 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And I start asking questions. Are we sure that these processes reflect the current operations? Maybe yes, maybe no. Have we checked? So periodic review is very critical because through periodic review, we can look at what is real growth and what is extra waste, extra fat on my process. And maybe we do identify the process growth from the black box you can see on the original design to the reviewed process with the red dotted lines on the outer side. What is not within the red box is probably additional fat that we are carrying along with us on our process. And if we do careful re-engineering and review and streamlining of the process, we should hopefully end up with a reviewed process that is, yes, of course, bigger than what it was originally because our business has grown, our business has bigger demands, we have diversified, but definitely not all the growth that was being carried along with us along the way. And therefore, we can talk about a redefined process that reflects our current situation. And we go ahead and implement the revised process. The moment we implement that revised process, we might feel happy that we've done a very good job. And of course we would have a lot of time, energy, effort, investment, and everything. But the moment that we implement the new redefined process, that becomes the current process. So if it becomes the current process, tomorrow, next week, 6 months' time, 1 year's time, things will change again. We are in a dynamic environment. And if we leave that process unreviewed for any length of time, we might again end up with the same scenario with bigger mushrooms growing on top of our redefined process. And therefore, the idea is that process reviews need to happen regularly depending on the sector, on the segment, on the dynamics of the industry you are in. And the story continues. Let us have a very quick look at what we see when we walk into organizations that seem to be very busy processing their services to deliver an output. Let's assume that we have a client who is interested in, let's go for a service industry. Let's think a client who's interested in taking a loan on our bank. So this client would walk into our customer services department and request that he talks to someone who will help him determine whether a loan facility is available for his needs. Of course, we need the customer services department to look into this. These guys are the expert people who know the best hospitality one can think of. You walk into their office, they offer you coffee, maybe biscuits if you're lucky, they make you feel comfortable, and they try to identify what you need. Once they have identified what you need, they have the basic knowledge to know to whom to refer you. And of course, they will be clever enough to pass you on to have a meeting with the correct and the appropriate advisor. So of course, they will give you an appointment where you will meet the advisor. The advisor is a more technical person who can understand what the customer's needs are and will take a profile of the customer so that they can take it on further into another department where they will start registering your details onto the classic system. So now you become known to the organization. Of course, it is important to have all the details recorded on the system. They need to identify you. You are a potential customer, a potential client, a potential business partner. Once we got all the documents registered on the system, we go to the experts who can match your needs to available funding options. These would be the accountants, they could be the fund managers, they could be the experts who know the finances and how they work and how best to match you on. Once the match is done and possible options are provided for funding the loan for client, we need to go into, let's say, a contract. We start drafting a proposal, which would be contractual in nature, which will define the terms and conditions and what have you. If you notice here, we have a chain of people who each and every one of them, departments, people, whatever you want to call them, they are experts within their specific niche. You cannot have the customer services representative to be expert at drafting contracts. Normally, he needs to be a lawyer or someone who knows the ins and outs for contracting. So therefore, I do expect there to be some level of specialization. But of course, as you notice, getting this thing done is involving a lot of coordination. And what do? We have to obviously hire someone, let's call him the manager, who would look into this coordination effort and bring it all together so that it will all follow through. I call the manager the glue. Why? Because he is there to bring together, to coordinate the sequence of activities that need to happen through different business units in order to deliver the service required by the client. So we have a solution and plan, and we have a manager to review the whole activity. Once we have the solution and plan, we prepare the documentation, and of course we print them. And we have a specialist printer whose job is to put the documents together, print them, bind them, and do all the logistics needed. Once that is done, obviously, the manager has to review them normally and have a look at them, see whether they fall within the criteria, authorization levels, whether it makes sense, see that it's okay. The manager is a very important person. The manager is always a busy person, and naturally, normally, sometimes this process can take some time until we get it signed back. Some time is lost. Once we get the documents back, reviewed and signed by the manager, we need to pass them on to the client for him to review, agree to the proposal, sign back, and send them back to us. This will normally also take some time. The client could be busy. The client could be away on holiday. Whatever it is, it's taking time. We are moving documentation. We are moving the process from one function to the other. Given that we now have a proposal, we now have the manager who is saying, okay, this makes sense to the bank and it meets the customer's needs. The customer thinks that it does satisfy his requirements. We are getting closer to making business happen. So what do? Once we receive the documents back, we do the necessary compliance and verification needs and making sure that everything is right and falling into place. It's not an abusive system, it is a real client, good intentions, there are good prospects. These all take some time. In the meantime, bear in mind that the client has nothing in hand yet. Once we do all the compliances and we confirm that everything is in order, of course, we need to get approval, authorization, call it whatever you like, from the big boss managing the division. So obviously we pop it around. The division director, whatever you want to call him, the guy who's ultimately responsible not just for the functions within this department, but for the loans, for the facilities offered by the bank. If the manager is normally busy managing the current processes, the director is a very busy guy thinking about strategies, attending seminars, looking at implementing new strategies and visions, and bringing business onto the bank and everything. So naturally, we have to wait for his availability before he can sign off again, review, authorize. That takes out some more time. Eventually, we have an approved document agreed by the client. It satisfies his needs. The manager has approved that this all makes sense internally. The director has authorized the facility to go away, to be given to the client. And we go back to the client, perhaps through the customer services representative or something similar, and we offer him his contract. I am not a banker by profession, but I can imagine that this process that we described here is nothing very far away from what might happen in different industries, in different sectors. To be honest with you, I have bounced this and many similar models with different people from different industries, and they say, yeah, okay, maybe not in that sequence, maybe a bit different, but more or less it is something like that. Does it make sense? Maybe. We do need specialists to take certain routes, to take certain decisions. We do need some levels of controls. So yes, maybe we do need the specializations. We do need maybe a little bit of silos. Because let's talk about healthcare. If I go into a clinic and I need an intervention, imagine I am greeted by the front office person who registers my name and details, and I explain to them that I have a note from my doctor requesting a minor surgical operation. The front office person will register me in and ask me to kindly pass on to the next room further into the clinic. And I walk into what looks like a doctor's clinic. The same person might sit me down and do a medical investigation. He would check me out. He would see that I am okay, fit for the intervention and all that. So far, so good. I would start questioning, oh, so the front office person is actually a medical person. Thank you very much. Next, he would ask me to step into the next room into the clinic, further down into the clinic. And this happens to be the operating theater. The same person would put on his gown, bring all the tools, and start the surgery. I don't think I would feel very comfortable at that level. Do we have a surgeon? Do we have a medical doctor? Do we have a front office administrator? Is it one and the same? So maybe yes, we do need some kind of specialization. But we also have to be careful that too much specialization will generate a lot of waste. While no clients are coming in at front office, the surgeon might be operating. Busy operating. It is a lengthy procedure. But while the surgeon is operating and he's a specialist, the front office person might be literally wasting his time staring at the desk waiting for new patients to come in. Is it possible for that person to be flexible enough to take on some other activities? We make them a bit more flexible. Definitely not into the specialized field, but maybe into complementary areas. Maybe they can do certain administrative tasks. Maybe they can help the GP who would be taking record of his patients to enter certain records rather than have the GP focusing more on his database rather than on the patient. These are all scenarios that one would want to challenge. Coming back to our little funny sketch that you have over there, let's say this is approximately a typical process in delivering a service. Going through it, you would notice at least a good 13 steps. some rather expensive glue called the manager, and a very expensive super glue called the director. Very top heavy, very expensive. Maybe sometimes the manager is more expensive than all the other different tasks. Having a lot of division in responsibilities can actually lead to a lot of waste. Possibly in that kind of scenario, while I cannot perhaps expect full flexibility between the customer service representative and the legal department who create the contracts, maybe I can have some kind of flexibility between the customer service representatives and the people registering the customer. Could I automate it? Could I have a database sitting up front at front office? Do I need to pass on through another person or another team? So here we need to talk about reaching the balance between specialization and what we call flexibility and multi-skilled. If no customers are popping into the office, we can do some back office. And therefore we have shared responsibilities, shared resources. If I have no data to input into my database, because it's all up and running, I can help maybe another function. We need to think more about flexibility. The more flexible our workforce is, the more multi-skilled our workforce is, the easier it is to enable us to make the process go through. If we stick within our own divisions, our own business units, our own particular specialities, the more likelihood it is that we will have waste by waiting, by handling, by transferring, by moving things. One word that haunts me is waste. Yeah. Oops, gone out. Yeah, this word haunts me, and as you might notice, it haunts me so much I even skipped it, trying to get rid of it. When we walk into organizations, we try to look at waste. Waste that people within the organization might not immediately be aware of. A few years back, I walked into a client, a service client, an administrative client, a transaction-based client, and I was having a quick chat with their CEO or managing director, whatever he was, trying to get to understand what kind of help we can give them in this regard. And this guy obviously was passionate about his job, passionate about his people. From memory, I think it was something like a team of about 80 or 90 people, all on administrative tasks, transaction-based. And he was telling me how busy they are. They are full capacity. And he does realize, because he's not, he's an educated person, he knows, he understands process. But he told me, listen, Joe, how about you have a look at our process, because we are very busy and I am sure we can do it in a better way. And after an initial discussion, I told him, yeah, can I have a quick look at your facility, at your operations? And this was an open plan office with the majority of the people working from a central open plan office, which was split onto two floors. I visited the larger part. This guy is proudly walking me through the office, telling me how busy people are, explaining to me which sections are what happens in each section. And he was walking me through the different operations. While I was listening carefully to what the CEO, the executive, was telling me, hearing him passionately telling me how busy people are, how hard they work, how hard they push, their personal effort, I was hesitating. And I told him, I don't want to hurt your feelings. I can understand the passion that you are demonstrating in your people and you believe in them. I told him, but to be blunt, and sometimes you have to rock the boat. To be blunt, what I was seeing was a bunch of headless chickens. Literally, people pushing things, pulling things, searching for things, screaming at each other, rummaging amongst files, paper files, electronic files, searching for communication, searching for emails, printing documents, reviewing documents. Something immediately told me that there was a lot of waste in this process. It was not smooth, for sure. It took a lot of effort, a lot of time to gain some improvements in that operations. There were various limitations. There were various controlled activities that were barriers to do much change. But yes, certain change could be done. And some change could be done by simple observation. And I challenge most of you guys, next time you're back at the office tomorrow morning, I call them lean spectacles. Put on your lean spectacles, put on your new lenses and look at what is happening around you. Challenge what is happening and observe that you will see people moving things around. You will see people staring out of the window, looking at the birds, checking the clouds. You'll see people walking with things. And as they walk, they meet people and they talk to other people, which is okay. And they store things, they archive files, they store on electronic media, which is even worse because you don't see it. They're checking each other's work. They're fixing broken things. A lot of this leads on to the classical scary word, waste. Observe it in your office, observe it in your operational plant, in your industrial plant, observe it in your manufacturing plant, observe it on the construction site. The construction site is a classical example. You will see a team of a good 100 people. Some of them are holding the building, not that it falls. Some of them are guarding the tools, not that someone takes them. Some of them are carrying things. Some of them are walking around. Some of them are talking on the phone. Some people are working. They are working hard. Now we have to understand the environment within which one would be operating. For all intents and purposes, you have to understand the environment within which the construction industry operates. The temperatures, cold, hot, windy, the safety, climbing on ladders and scaffolding and trucks. So we have to understand not just the actual logic of how we do things, not just the rules how we do things. Those are good things to observe, but we also have to observe the environment within which we are operating. And we need to take that into context when we are reviewing our processes. It would be nice if we can manage our activities that are not value-adding. If we can reduce the moving, the storing, the carrying, the shifting, the checking, the fixing the broken. Why did it break in the first time? What can we do within our process to enable things not to go wrong? Most of you, I'm sure, you lead a very hectic day. You're running from one place to another. You are visiting clients, visiting suppliers, going to the office, coming back to the office. I spend most of my time driving around a tiny island. And I find myself very often stopping by, filling up my car with fuel. Now, I am normally a very busy person and sometimes also forgetful. Now, the car manufacturer was clever enough to know that Joe is going to buy their model of car, and Joe leads a very hectic and busy schedule. He burns a lot of fuel in doing that, and he has to pop by the fuel station to fill in quite regularly. And the car manufacturer also knew that Joe could be somewhat forgetful. So probably the first time I would have stopped by to fill up my car, I would stop by, open the fuel cap, fill it up to the top, a couple of Well, a good €100 later, I drive into the car and drive off with a full fuel tank, with something like €100 less in my pocket, and also possibly without a fuel cap, because I would have left it on top of the fuel pump. Because they knew that that is very likely to happen, what did the car manufacturer, thank you very much, do? They actually made me pull the key out of my ignition, pop it into the fuel cap, and in order to open the fuel cap, my key has to stay locked inside the fuel cap. As I put my fuel cap with the key attached onto the pump while I fill up my car, when I'm going back into my car, the first thing I need to do is start the engine and drive off. I cannot normally start the engine if I don't have the key in hand. That would tell me, hey Joe, what's wrong? Where's the key? Of course, the key is stuck to the fuel cap. The fuel cap is on the tank, on the pump. And I get back out, I bring the fuel cap and the key, I plug the fuel cap back into its place, retrieve my key back, pop myself back into the car, and I drive off. That is called a mistake-proof, an error-proof, an idiot-proof, if you like, system. It helps me not make mistakes. It helps me not having to drive back to the fuel station to collect my cap if I am lucky. It helps me not having to stop by the agent's place to buy a new fuel cap. That is called a Poka-Yoka system. It is called a mistake-proof system. So we have to design our processes in order to make them as mistake-proof as possible to enable us reduce on the amount of checking, on the amount of fixing, on the amount of having to move around documents to and fro for approval, for review, waiting until it's turn to reprocess the broken bits. They are all systems that help us eliminate waste. If we had to review how we spend our time, and that is a very generous picture you have over there, possibly I could relate that out of my effort in doing anything, maybe 25% of the time I am adding value. I am doing what I should be doing. There are other times where I am messing around trying to get my laptop to work, trying to find my application. I'm searching for my application. I am checking for what I could have done wrong in my work. I have people inspecting my work. My secretary, I need to check her letter. I am probably moving something from one place to another, sending emails, carrying files, shifting material. I am probably waiting for a document to print. And while I wait for the document to print, I'm literally staring, waiting, doing nothing, relaxing if you like. I am storing material, storing files. I once walked into an archive at a client of mine. This archive was packed to the brim. You open the door and files drop out of the door, literally packed with material. Obviously, the client told me we have an archiving problem. I said, yes, you do have an archiving problem. But the good thing was that they could see it, they realized. What happens today with electronic media? Do we have an archiving problem? Of course not. We just pop it into another hard disk, memory space is very low, and we store all the bits and pieces of data that we need since ever. No problem there. My only problem is that if I need to run a report, an electronic report, using this database, if I have records that date back 10 years, this could mean that my report needs to go through 10 years worth of data. Naturally, depending on how the report is structured electronically. Going through 10 years worth of data might in actual fact take some time. So I might not be generating waste directly, because you might tell me memory space is not an issue today, not a cost, but I might be generating waiting times for reports to run. If I have so many people running reports of the system, I have so much of that time accumulated of people waiting for the report to run. It could be a few minutes, but tot up a few minutes every time, every day, every manager, every delegate of yours runs those reports. indirectly we are generating waste. Right, so we talk about basically 8 wastes, which I am sure that most of you are very familiar with. One of them is doing more than we should. Let's produce more in case we need it. Let us produce more in case we get more sales. We need to have product available on the shelf. So we go into what is called an overproduction mode. Overproduction could be in fabrication, it could be in services. You might request more details than you need when you're opening a bank account. Do I need all this level of information at this stage? Maybe later if it materializes, if the deal materializes, but maybe not. So sometimes we over-engineer our processes. Inventory and storage. Let us produce more to have available in stock. Simple case. Weekend is coming up. Confectioner on the corner street, very popular confectioner. Probability is that he will sell a lot of cakes. So the classical case is that 2 days before, the chef is extremely busy baking loads and loads of cakes in anticipation of selling most of them. Nothing wrong with that. The only problem is that we might be overproducing or underproducing and we run out of stock. But until we sell them, we have to store them. We have to provide the right conditions. We have to refrigerate. We have to control. We have to make sure that the cream stays fresh. These are all additional activities that generate waste. In the ideal case, like most fast food outlets do, if I want a nice cake, I request a cake and it is baked there and then for me. One piece flow. That is the ideal scenario, which is not always possible in every instance. But in certain fast-moving catering establishments, you can actually observe this one-piece flow happening. Waiting. How many times do you find yourself waiting for an approval for a purchase requisition, for a purchase order? If I need something, I could probably decide that I need something. I could probably specify what I need and generate a specification document. I can probably request quotations for that service that I need or that product that I need from a number of suppliers, decide which one is the best. I raise a purchase requisition order. I take it to my boss. He signs it off. I pop it over to our procurement people and they will run away and fetch it for me. If it is something that is normally available, it could possibly take a few hours, depending on the logistics. How many times have we ended up needing something? We start the procurement process and 3 weeks later, we still don't have that something. Those 3 weeks are mostly spent in waiting. Our proposal is waiting approval from the manager. We requested quotations from our suppliers are too busy and we are waiting on them to give us approximate prices or exact prices, whatever it is. The value adding part could be narrowed down to a few hours. The real scenario could be a number of weeks. The number of weeks less the few hours that are value adding is termed waste. How many times do we move things, take people different places from one place to another, processes, moving materials, all waste. Over-processing, over-engineering our activities, making more than we should. I need to run a weekly report, but I go ahead and run a monthly report, which will take more time, require more analysis, more details, and I'm not requested to do that. motion. We move things from one place to another. I am doing something on the 5th floor and then I have to move myself or the activity to the 5th floor in order to get it reviewed and approved. And then I go back down to the 1st floor in order to get it done. Doing things the wrong way, we have to fix them. So lack of quality, defects are a problem in themselves. I think that would be the easiest to understand. People skills, not using the right skills, the right people in the right job. Over qualified people doing more mundane tasks. Or the contrary, asking someone to do more than they are knowledgeable, skilled to do. We'll probably get it wrong, probably generate defects. We need to correct them, we need to check them, we need to test them. These ways I want you to stop a bit and ponder on. They are all things that you would want to look into with your lean spectacles when you look at processes in order to review them. When you are going back to your offices tomorrow, when you are reviewing what is happening actually in your office. Why are people busy? Are they busy managing any of those 8 activities there, those 8 points there? If they are not value adding. We normally talk a lot about this during our Informa business process analysis, mapping and modeling courses that we organize from time to time, in-house or open courses in different parts of the world, specifically within the UAE region. We are actually running a couple of courses at the moment that talk specifically about these factors, these philosophies. And we have some upcoming courses related to these subjects coming up later on in the year in mid-November. I can encourage people who are interested to listen about these and do some practice by logging on to the Informa website, where you can find a whole set of events that are being held. And if obviously you are interested, you are very much more than welcome to come over and have a chat with us, and we can discuss your needs. Now, I would very much invite, I would allow a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes, on answering some questions that you might have. So we welcome you to, if you haven't already done that, post your questions on the panel that you have in front of you. So we seem to have a couple of questions over here. Right, one of the questions here says, is there a way to enumerate inherent waste in a process? Now, if I understand this well, I can associate this question with saying, how can I quantify it? Yes, it is very important to quantify it. Many a times, when you come to do these changes, the problem is convincing people to do things differently. Yes, so therefore, it's not the first time people tell me, Joe, I've been doing this for 20 years. I know by my business, please keep out. It is the way it is done in my industry. But it might be the way you are seeing it, the way you have become accustomed to it. So it becomes part of your DNA. That is the way you see it happen. So very much so, it is very important to, I believe a lot in measurement, I believe a lot in numbers. So it is very important to try and put a measure, a quantified value behind it. Defects, you can measure defects, the level of defectosity, the defects per million, the errors per million, the typing errors per million, the report corrections you have to do. Cost, put a cost to every task. How much is it costing me to do this? Is it really adding value? If it isn't, then that cost in dollars, in euros, whatever you want to do it, is actually waste. So yes, that is a very important point there. Measure and produce your current measure, your current costs, your current situation, and after you do careful analysis, you can try to project how much saving you can do. But this comes only after you do a careful analysis of your business processes. Right, we seem to have another question. In the midst of rapid changes in our company that affect business processes, how should process governance units react with regards to updating their processes? Yes, very good. Again, this is not something that one would go off and do in isolation. We operate within an organization. An organization has its own environment, it has its own policies, its own governance, its own culture, its own history. And of course, within an organization, we have our own specialists, our own silos, if you like it. We have our own expertise. We need to bring all on board and enable people to go through these changes together. So the idea is that the process governance that you need to bring is a consolidated team of people, call them experts in their own field, that when you are redesigning or redeveloping a process flow, these people are actually contributing to their part of specialization. The idea is that when you design the process, which goes through a cross section of your functions, each function will become an advisor to how best to create, to design that business process. This will definitely help make changes more rapid and more reliable, because now you are not designing the way you think it should happen, but the way your expertise, your internal expertise, have consulted you to do it, because they know their part of the process, their part of the function best. Right. Yes, what is the most effective way to determine waste in a business process? Right. One starting point is definitely observation. Observation and, as we said earlier, quantification. There are different techniques how one could observe a process. There's process modeling, there's value stream mapping. They are all techniques that help you identify the value-adding parts of the process and the wasteful parts of the process. You are punching sheet metal to create something in sheet metal. The punching process would probably take a few seconds to punch a sheet, and out of that sheet come out 100 discs. That is the value adding part. That could take maybe loading, punch, offloading 1 minute, 2 minutes. Those punched discs are going to wait in a pallet somewhere until they get transferred to the next process in line. Until they get transferred to the next process in line, which could be next week for all you know, or the next hour for all you know, or the next half an hour for all you know, for them to be drilled through and something has done to them, that waiting time is absolute waste. Value stream mapping will help you identify the value adding bits and the non-value adding bits. What is the importance of culture in creating process-oriented organization? If I tell you very important, I would be underestimating and saying an understatement. It is the thing that has to be taken care of. Process management, process modeling, process design, process re-engineering, defining the business logic, defining the business rules, that is all the fun part. Believe me, that is the fun part of doing things. The tough part comes in implementing, and implementation has to do with the way people do things. It has to do, therefore, with the company culture, with the individual's culture, individuals meaning senior management, middle management, and operational people. So yes, change management is extremely important. It is a topic that I dedicate a lot of time to during our programs, because mapping and modeling is the fun part, it's the easy part, it's the exciting part. Implementing change can break down your project, your process, your improvement plan. So yes, here we are dealing with processes, we are dealing with people, and we are using technology to help us put it all together. The process part is the fun part, the technology is the exciting part, the people part is the critical one. So yes, culture is the first and foremost And before you start anything, you have to make sure that you have senior management, executive management, the top team, fully supportive of this activity. They need to promote and support all that goes into business process modeling, into managing waste, into reducing it and making more effective operations. Right, I think the time is up. I hope that you found this an interesting discussion. I would look very much forward into addressing different variants of this topic. It is a massive topic, an exciting topic, a topic that can really keep you occupied for some good time. I sincerely wish you luck in your projects, in your ambitions in this regard. If you have any questions later on, if you would like to establish contact in order to discuss certain points or maybe even participate in one of the programs, do feel free to register or pass it on through the Informa website or email addresses, and we'll be very happy to help answer you even on individual basis. We will try to help you as much as we can. It was a lovely evening talking to you. I hope that you have at least carried forward some value. I wish you all a nice evening and cheerio.